here to discuss what all of this means, I'm joined in the studio by Richard Fitzwilliams, public relations consultant and royal commentator, and TalkTV contributor Paula Rhone-Adrien. Always great to see you both. And going to Mike Paul first, President and CEO of Reputation, Doctor down the line, joining us from the US this evening. Mike, we'll start with you. Were you sold on this? These reported sources saying that Harry and Meghan are kind of done with being out there?
Well, whenever you say you're done for life, I always have a warning for any client that's in that kind of a situation. But I think we need to remember the two pieces that really tie to why they were upset in the first place. And it was tied to remarks about their children and remarks that were filled with race, really racism. If those two issues are off the table, dealing with the royals, and of course we know historically that's not how it's gone, then I think they have an opportunity. But I think we need to look for the future to still have those two issues. Discussions of the children, that might not be something that they accept, especially from a race perspective. And of course, Harry marrying a woman who is biracial and race always being a part of the issue.
I think you raise an interesting point that is worth remembering where this all comes from. Of course, from Harry's point of view as well, he always brings up, obviously, his upbringing, what happened to his mother. Those are the reasons he uses, in his long-running battles with the press and with the media as well. I want to come to Paula in the studio to react to some of what you've said there, Mike. Do you think that's fair, Paula, that, that is what will keep the discussion going, the children and the race issues?
And, of course, the press. And the press's reaction, because let's not forget that when we have a story like Meghan and Harry, it's the press and their ability to manipulate that story, manipulate the narrative. I think that's what's going to be pushing this. So, for example, you spoke about in your introduction about the privacy. We saw the South Park clip about privacy. Nowhere in Harry's speech, when he finally said, "Afraid we've got to go, guys," nowhere did he say in that speech, "I am going, I'm leaving the royal family, I'm leaving this country to lead a private life." That's not what they said. In fact, they said the absolute opposite. They said they wanted to continue their charitable work. They said they wanted to continue the royal legacy because they weren't able to do that. And we also have to remember that this is a family, this is a man who lost his mother and wanted to protect his wife, a wife who has received death threats, real death threats. People are in prison now, serving sentences for those death threats. Of course he wanted to and needed to speak out.
So, Richard, let's come to you on this, because that is what Paula's pointing out. It's a battle between the media and the Sussexes here. And what is the ultimate resolution? And often the complaint that you hear, contrary to what Paula's saying, is that they have demanded that they be left alone, and yet they still keep putting themselves out there.
Well, firstly, the idea of the silent Sussexes, it's an interesting concept, but I certainly don't entertain much hope that we are going to get it, because there are several issues involved here. Now, the first one, regarding Spare, which I have to say I wondered who'd advised Harry, issues such as how he lost his virginity, the drugs issue, which is going to be raised in court in the United States as to how he entered and so forth, and then, of course, a penile frostbite, that sort of thing. I mean, I wondered, saying how many people and how many Afghans he'd taken out, that was extremely ill-advised, so you wondered who was advising him. But on this particular issue, what we're seeing is very much someone who's, I think, a campaigner. Now, he believes that with regard to the press, as you were saying, I mean, it is something that he feels very deeply about. He actually believes it's his life's work, he's called it, to clean up what he sees as the origin stables of the British media. There are several court cases, no less than 5, 3 of them against media groups, either about to start or having started. And what we've seen is, I think, a very, very bitter Harry. But on the other hand, don't forget the contract with Random House, because here's another danger. If the royal family for one second think that Sussexes are necessarily placated because they haven't received the apology they hoped for, It was a 4-book deal, we've been told, with Random House. Meghan could write her memoirs. Harry could have a book out of the 800 pages. We only had 400 in spare, and he could write about his childhood. So we've a lot to play for, so to speak, so far as the Sussexes in the international arena are concerned.
Coming back to Mike, what you're thinking when you're hearing all of this. I mean, so far we haven't had, I think, any extreme views, which you sometimes get in debates about Sussexes, of sort of everyone just wants them to shut the hell up. We're hearing pretty balanced remarks here about the press and the relationship with them.
Well, I think it's important to understand some key terms like leaks. That's what those cases are about. So let's be accurate about why Harry is so upset. And he wants the world to understand, quite frankly, how the tabloids work in the UK, with a lot of leaks, even from family members releasing some of those leaks. And that was also in the book. The comments that recently came out about having a different view and saying we're done with it was really about attacks that dealt with race, children, and various crisis issues that were tied to the Sussex. Not everything. So let's not throw the baby in with the bathwater and say that they're not going to speak at all and they're never going to come out of the house. Of course, that's not what we're talking about. And yes, there are different kinds of books that can be written. And they can also produce things for Netflix and not only be the stars of it in defending. But I would say this. I don't think Harry and Meghan are ever going to give up the opportunity and the responsibility to defend themselves and their children if they are personally attacked with lies.
And
I don't think that is ever going to end.
And Mike, they're perfectly entitled to do that, as you said, and they are private individuals and they have a certain amount of celebrity brand. Of course, I want to ask you from your reputation specialism point of view, do you think it's been a successful rebrand for the two of them in the US and here in the UK?
To date, no. And the reason why is the root of their brand, especially Harry's, that trips into Meghan's and to the children, is at its core royal, not American, not a reality star, not a defender of various things that he's even gone through in life. If your brand at its core is royal and you take that away, your brand is damaged. What you need to do is leave open the opportunity of potentially, like some have said in the media most recently, that you might rejoin the royal family in fullness, that you might still move back to the UK, that you might still have a mea culpa that earns your way back into the royal family in a very different way. Quite frankly, the way that the king had hoped that it would be original.
Mike, I'm going to come to the voices in the studio because you've got two people here in Britain shaking their head vigorously to some of the things you're saying, and I think it's to do with, Paula, Harry coming back to the UK and his relationship with the royals.
I did want to slightly disagree with Mike on this one because remember we had the People's Princess.
Yeah.
Diana took a very bold move and she left. And she not only left the royal family, she left this country. And we were told that that was absolutely her plan, was to live away from this country. And in effect, it's sad to see that Harry has had to take that same path in order to do what he thinks he needs to do to protect his wife. And coming back to this issue, this relationship with the press, ultimately, I was intrigued at the way the story was being sold today. Oh, he's finally going to stop talking. Oh, he's finally going to shush. Oh, he's finally not going to say anything. The press aren't going to leave him alone. No. The press aren't going to leave her alone. And any time they dare to open their mouths about anything, she straightened her hair, Rosanna, and it made front headline news.
Of course, it's important business, Paula, hair straightening.
Apparently it is.
Well,
apparently
it is very
Richard.
important. It's so important, the enormity of the brand. It's very interesting because when one's thinking of how well they're doing, the extremely controversial, near catastrophic car chase, which I think was a horrible experience, there's absolutely no doubt, and there's no doubt it brought memories of Diana back. I mean, the paparazzi, in my view, are lower than vermin.
Richard, you agreed that it was near catastrophic because there were
no,
reports.
No, not necessarily. There, some recollections may vary on that point.
Yeah, but indeed, none of us were there, but near catastrophic was the wording they used, and it was debunked a little bit by some reports.
It certainly
afterwards.
hasn't been backed up as the exact title, but what interests me is the positively frenetic media interest worldwide in them, and there's absolutely no doubt as Harry goes through these various court cases. We also, as I say, we could see further books. So far as Netflix is concerned, we saw a 6-hour docuseries, which I don't think was particularly helpful, although it wasn't desperately harmful. But Spare was him going Spare as I saw it, and those interviews as well. So many were so damaging to the royal family.
Let me ask you, from a subjective point of view, Richard, because you've watched the royals for most of your career, do you want to see Harry go silent and disappear? Would you think that would be better for him?
I don't think that he and Meghan have any intention of doing that. But
do you want
what I want to see is them ceasing to attack the royal family, because what we've had is a form of guerrilla war over a period of time since they stepped down, and it began with Oprah, and subsequently, of course, we've seen a lot of it recently. But the thing is, the palace can't fight back, not easily. The moment
of course they fight back.
No,
Sources say the palace fight, and they fight hard.
The palace can't make statements, and if they can't make statements, the problem is the Sussexes then can control the agenda, and that is what they're superb in doing, and that is what I fear. We've got this rift, and I fear it's going to go on. I wish it had never happened, believe me.
Of course, yeah, you know, there are subjective points on this. There are the facts, and there is everything else, and there is the reputation of brand issue. We've been very pleased to be joined by Mike Paul in the US this evening on this, as well as Paula and Richard here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us for this talk. Now,